talking the best wide receiver to have in 2024. Let's get into it.
Let's go.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Dynasty After Dark. I'm your host Calvin Timms, and I'm excited to be talking to you guys about the best wide receiver to go and try and get for Dynasty in 2024. And I think that this guy is, I've been a big hater on this player for a long time. But this year, the value has dropped so low that I have to be in on him. It's just too valuable for what he can do for fantasy football this year. And I'm excited to make my case on why I am so excited for this player. Before I do that though, thank you guys if you are checking this out and you're a new viewer. We can't do any of this without you guys. So we really do appreciate you guys. If you can, please subscribe to the channel so you can get all of our content. And I've just been really trying to do live a lot more these last couple of weeks, trying to get more into the YouTube live. So if you like the live aspect of it, I am happy to try and continue this. And the one thing I'm going to try and do, if you guys are checking out the podcast here right now, if you guys have any questions, I'm going to do those live at the end of the podcast. So I'm going to be watching chat. If any of the viewers live want to see this, hit us up in the comments and I'll kind of address some of those questions here at the end. If not, then, you can always comment on the video for tomorrow when this drops and let us know if you have any questions there. So that said, please, again, one last time, subscribe to the channel so you can hear all of our content, like the video, leave a comment down below. It just helps us out with the algorithm. And again, we can't do any of this without you guys. You can find me over on Twitter at TDC_Calvin, the podcast at FF After Dark. Now, I want to jump into the player. And it's going to be Diontae Johnson with the Carolina Panthers, traded over from the Pittsburgh Steelers after a kind of questionable year last year. A lot of Diontae Johnson, people were in on him for a very, very long time. Massive volume the last 3 years before 2023. In 2020, had 144 targets, 2021, 169, and then 2022, 147. Monster targets. Last year, drops all the way down to 87. He was visibly frustrated at multiple points during the entire season, visibly just shaken up, and started the season on a bad note. He was injured for a lot of the offseason and missed 4 games last year. He played 43% of the snaps in week 1. And then gets injured for 4 weeks after that. Not a great start to the season and his new contract with the Pittsburgh Steelers because they paid him a ton of money and ultimately they traded him a year later. Now, Diontae Johnson was always very high in the value of a player. He was consistently right around that 10 to 14 kind of fringe player, and I never loved him for that. His highest fantasy finish was in 2021 when he had those 169 targets for 107 catches and 1,100 yards. So never really a monster yardage type of player. Always pretty good on the touchdowns, even last year in 13 games played. Some of it banged up, some of it not, with questionable, we'll say, the least quarterback play last year. He still got 5 touchdowns. Now, he does get traded to the Carolina Panthers, and the reason why I think he's such a good fit for what they're doing over in Carolina and why I'm excited for his fantasy value, which we're going to get to in just a minute, is because of the way that they're going to, in my mind, throw him out on a week-to-week basis. You look at last year for the Carolina Panthers, and obviously they take Bryce Young, number 1 overall. They don't really have a ton of targets. They had Adam Thielen at the time. They drafted Jonathan Mingo and Terrace Marshall, who was once a potential superstar, budding superstar that people were excited about. And they had Frank Reich, who was a very good coach for a long period of time over in Indianapolis, kind of fell off, got fired, comes over here. Everyone says, oh, this is a match made in heaven. He's going to make Bryce Young very, very good for the NFL, for fantasy football and everything like that. He made Adam Thielen extremely valuable last year, and this is part of the reason why I'm so excited for for Deontay Johnson. Last year, Adam Thielen had 137 targets, 103 catches for 1,000 yards, and 4 touchdowns. He finished as the wide receiver number 17 in PPR leagues, which is nuts. He was 32 at the time. So, he's going into the season 33 years old. I don't think that the team wants to lean on Adam Thielen to be their number one guy. They traded a decent, I think it was like a 3rd round pick for Deontay Johnson because of the contract aspect, which is not small investments. When you see guys like Amari Cooper going for a 5th round pick, a 3rd is much more substantial than that. So I do think this team wants to throw Deontay Johnson out there and be the primary guy for the wide receiver core. They also spent a 1st round pick on Xavier Legette as well. They traded up to 32 to have a 5th year option on Xavier Legette. Now, he was a little bit more of a controversial player as well, had the 5th year breakout in college, which is he did nothing for 4 straight years and then a massive, amazing 5th year in college. So the question is, can he do that at the NFL level? I don't know. I'm more out than in on Xavier Legette, but they clearly wanted him to be a core piece. They wanted him to be the Mike Evans of this offense, whereas I view Deontay Johnson as more of the Chris Godwin. Now, why am I bringing up those 2 players? Well, the new offensive coordinator, or the new head coach, actually, Dave Canales, was the offensive coordinator for Tampa Bay last year with Baker Mayfield. And that's where I think that it's very interesting. If you look at last year, it didn't feel this good. It did not feel this good for Chris Godwin. Finished the year with 83 catches for 1,000 yards and 2 touchdowns. Conversely, his counterpart on the other side of the field, Mike Evans, finished with 79 catches for 1,250 yards and 13 touchdowns. I don't think that was the intention of those 2 players last year. I think they wanted it to be a little bit more evenly split with the touchdowns. But Mike Evans, man, Mike Evans is going to Mike Evans. He is always a touchdown monster, and he probably always will be. Chris Godwin at the time was 27 years old. Deontay Johnson is going into his 28-year-old season for the NFL, and I do believe that they are planning to get him around 140 targets yet again. Now, you go back to Deontay Johnson and what he was able to do with 140 targets the last time he had that was, let's say we go back to 2020 with decent quarterback play and 140 targets, 88 catches for 923 yards. I do think he would be able to break that. I think he's improved as a route runner substantially from that 2020 season. So, you give him 144 targets and let's say he gets, around 100 catches, 105 catches, similar to, what Adam Thielen had just last year. He's going to have around 1,100 yards. He'll probably have around 8, 9, 10 touchdowns just because of the touchdown threat that he is. Now, that puts him right around wide receiver number 15 in fantasy leagues, and he's only 28 years old. He is not busted and washed just yet in my mind. I still believe that Deontay Johnson has quite a few years left in the tank. Now, when you pair that to his fantasy value and kind of transitioning over to that part of the conversation, he's currently ranked as the wide receiver number 50, 146 overall. He's equivalent of the 209 to 210. He's going behind guys like Keenan Allen, behind Jameson Williams, right around Jalen Polk, Romeo Dobbs. Deontay Johnson has league-winning capabilities for rosters this year because of how cheap he is in fantasy football. A 2nd round pick for a guy that is likely to finish top 20 has the potential to finish even potentially top 12. And that's more touchdown luck than anything else. But for that late, for wide receiver 50 value, you can get a guy that's top 20, top 15. We all have, 2 wide receivers, 3 wide receivers, or in those flex spots below that. We need the depth on these guys. And you can get this guy for so cheap, which is why, in my mind, he is the best bet for the number 1 wide receiver in 2024 in terms of value, in terms of production. Just the gap there is so massive to me that there's no other player that I think has right around wide receiver 1, 2, right around that 12 to 15 range that you can get that cheaply in fantasy football. Maybe Christian Watson is the only other guy if he can get that hamstring, but that's a completely different argument because there's the physical side of that where Christian Watson, you don't know if he's going to be able to stay healthy. He has not shown that to this point. To this point in time, we've seen everything we need to see from Diontae Johnson. It's not an injury-based thing. It's not a, I guess the biggest thing would be just the quarterback, right? Which is Bryce Young. Now, again, the reason why I like this a lot, if you go back to last year with Bryce Young, it was not great. It was not great for the number 1 overall pick. 527 passing attempts for 315 completions. But ironically, you go over to, again, Dave Canales with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 364 completions for Baker Mayfield just last year with a total of 566 attempts. So, about 40 more attempts, maybe one extra game, which makes sense because Bryce Young only played 16 games. I think Baker played all 17. So right there in line with it, massive regression to the mean for Baker Mayfield with 4,000 yards versus the 3,000 that Bryce Young was on pace for. So if you can get that up there, which I do believe they've invested a lot in the offensive line this last year, they have invested a lot in the weapons. You have Jonathan Brooks, who a lot of people are excited about. They still have Chuba Hubbard, who was a very valuable NFL player last year, sneaky kind of upside fantasy player last year. Xavier Legette, they have Adam Thielen still. They have Jonathan Mingo if he can have a year 2 breakout. They've invested a lot around Bryce Young, so there's nothing in my mind that says he cannot get around that even 36 to 3,800 yards. I do believe that whatever you want to feel about Bryce Young, I don't care too much about his value, but what it does to Diontae Johnson. If Bryce Young is around, let's say 3,800 yards, Diontae Johnson is easily clearing 1,000 yards. He's going to be a massive percentage of that, and I do think that he's just going to be a massive spike up. Dave Canales, the reason why I believe in him so much, 2 years ago, he was the resurgence for Geno Smith. He was there when Geno came in, became the starter, and Geno looked like a superstar. He leaves, goes to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and Geno still is okay, but not the elite level that he was 2 years ago. The same time, he goes over to Tampa Bay. Baker Mayfield looks like a stud again, kind of like he did as a rookie, what everyone kind of hoped he would be in the NFL. So is it the players that they just kind of had a little bit of a resurgence, or was it Dave Canales unlocking that potential in them? And the good news is for Bryce Young, if it is Dave Canales, he's the head coach, so he's not going anywhere anytime soon. So I think that there's a lot of potential upside. I think people are just out on the Carolina Panthers, which is depressing Diontae Johnson's value quite heavily. And that's where I believe that he is just a massive sleeping value for fantasy football in 2024. So that's all I had for today. I wanted to do a quick and short video for you guys talking about why I love Diontae Johnson so much and why you guys should go and invest in him. And if you guys have any comments, leave them down below, and we'll be back with more on Wednesday. But I'm going to start doing these live streams every single week if I can, every Monday around, I'll try and do it for around 8:30 to 9 o'clock, somewhere in that range. It kind of depends. I got kids, I got the wife and everything, so sometimes it'll be a little bit easier than others, but every Monday at around 8:30 to 9, Wednesdays and Fridays, same thing, 8:30 to 9:30, somewhere in that range. We're going to be going live with the video Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for here until the start of the season and our babies show up. That's when things are going to change a little bit, but yeah, if you guys are tuning in, thank you guys so much. We are excited to have questions from you. Hit us up with anything that you want answered for your fantasy league, and we'd be happy to get those going. Now, one last time, if you can, please subscribe to the channel. Just helps us out. Leave a comment down below, like the video. The podcast, if you want it audio only, it is on Spotify, Apple, Google, anywhere that you guys really listen to your podcasts. If you want to see my dumb face or Dale's dumb face, you can see us on YouTube or on Rumble. And yeah, thank you guys so much for checking this video out. And until next time, have a good night.
And we all got dreams, we all want things, but what you gonna do for it? How you gonna move for it? What you gonna be?